Katherine Hawes is a distinguished lawyer and entrepreneur with a wealth of experience in both traditional and the digital legal landscapes. She is the founder of Digital Age Lawyers, where she leverages her experience to navigate the complexities of modern law. Katherine's innovative approach has positioned her as a thought leader in the fields of social media, technology, and marine and fisheries law. Let's find out why with this colourful conversation with the always delightful Katherine Hawes. So, Katherine, let's start out by explaining digital law to a child. If you had to explain it to a child, how could you do that in a couple of sentences?
Well, mine would be careful where you put your fingers on the keyboard, because quite frankly, what you write is now going to be your legacy until you're 50, 60, 100, however long, you last for on this earth, and then probably even after. So I don't know, but there's actually now a book of poems that have come out from all the sayings of Donald Trump. And it is just and the reason I raise that is because it's going to be used against you at some point. So I think what I'd say is, whilst you have access to all the technology and you think that phone is your private space, think again.
Yeah.
It really is not private. If you really want to have a private conversation, maybe not go to a coffee shop, but, but go to somewhere and have an face-to-face conversation.
Yeah.
Or actually do something that's really novel, pick up the phone and talk into it.
Mm-hmm.
Surprisingly, that can happen.
Mm-hmm. Good tip. In your experience, what's the most surprising legal issue that has arisen out of our digital age?
Well, I suppose one of the things is that as we, those who started off in Facebook are now getting into their 50s and 60s, passing away, they've got LinkedIn accounts. One of the more unusual ones is, a dispute between family members about whether or not to have a memorial page for a parent that passed. Because one of the things is, half the family wanted it, half the family didn't. And the thing was that when it came to birthdays and reminders, people sort of didn't want it on that day. They wanted their own personal space, how to remember that person. So, it was a mediation between the family members. What we would now suggest is people actually appoint something called a digital executor that can shut down your accounts. I mean, I've still got a friend who passed away 10 years ago, and it keeps telling me about he's still employed every anniversary because nobody has the ability to shut down that account.
Yeah. So obviously there's a whole process to make that happen. People need to go down that rabbit hole though, so that I guess they can come to you to find out. How would they find out?
Well, we suggest actually now putting it into your will, appointing a digital executor, and also start to have conversations with your family around not just the planning of the funeral, but, that digital space as well. So, do you want your Facebook page made into a memorial? Facebook now have brought out where you can actually do it yourself. You can actually nominate, but still have that conversation, because you're going to be dead. So it's not going to impact on you, but it will pretty much impact on your family.
Yeah. So if you could share a story where a seemingly minor digital oversight has led to a major legal headache, what would that be? I'm sure you've got a few.
Well, there's a few. Look, there's probably two groups here. The first is it was an employee who was a school nurse, registered nurse at the time. What happened was, for 2 days a week she was working at home. She was having trouble connecting into the workplace on those 2 days, into her email account, and it was clunky. It was taking a long time. So she thought, to be more efficient, she would download her work emails onto her personal computer. Unfortunately, that personal computer was also used by her son, who went to the same school. And and again, it was just that not thinking of consequences. But obviously, as a school nurse, she also had documents around people's diagnosis, eating, their psychologist reports of kids that he went to school with. So there was actually a report done by one of the parents who made a complaint. The school then had a notice of a data breach. She had personally a notice of a data breach, and because she was a registered RN, she was actually brought up at the nurses board for breaching privacy. So these are the things people really, and the proliferation of work at home, it's something now that needs to be front of mind. Should you be having this conversation at the dinner table? Is there a password on your mobile phone so your kids don't know the texts that are coming in? So that would be one really, I think, poignant example of how it all went wrong really quickly.
Can go bad fast. I guess that sort of brings us to enacting sort of new laws that help people navigate that pathway. What if there was one new law you could bring into play? How would that?
Well,
what would that look
I
like?
think it's about the fact that a lot of people misunderstand the current legislation, and it's what I mean by that. It's also piecemeal. Yeah. So, for instance, you've got your criminal law around sexting, which is if you send. So if you're 19 and you receive or send a picture of your 17-year-old girlfriend, even though you can see the stuff in real life and had sex, you can't have pictures of it. So I think it's also about looking at everything we currently have and bringing it into consistency so people do understand if they are or are not breaching it. And same with privacy and data. Really start to understand as we progress to the work at home, and not just home, but even our co-working spaces, our coffee shops. Is it something I should be, sending from a coffee shop, or should I wait for a more secure network?
Yeah.
It used to be the old adage. What was it? Qantas, I think, wasn't it? Was it Department of Defence? They left a USB and a computer at the Qantas lounge. That was it. Now you're leaving your data everywhere.
Yeah.
So I think it's that law around, I don't think people particularly want to breach it. It's just that it is moving so fast. So, for instance, in AI now in America, they've just enacted a law in some states where if you are using AI on your website to answer questions, you have to tell people under consumer law now that it's a bot answering the questions.
Yeah, well, that's fair.
Well, and that's what people are saying.
Yeah. And like you said, it's so dynamic, that it's so ever-changing. How do you stay across those changes? How do you recommend people stay across those changes?
Well, look, I suppose it's subscribing to authority newsletters. So, we put out one regularly around changes that business owners need to be familiar with. Attending conferences in relation to AI and how it's going to change, data, having a review each year. It probably is something that business owners in particular don't do, is do governance and compliance. I say governance to people and they sort of run out the door screaming.
It's quite unsexy.
It is. I did think about, we could probably put a G spot in your business, but I thought, governance to give it, but it is going to be so important going forward. Yeah. Because it's going to be the thing that saves you from having the Privacy Commissioner come in.
So just to change tack a little, because, we could talk about G-spots all day, but let's move on to the fact that I know you're super well known in the Western Sydney business community, but not a lot of people know you as the fish lawyer. Can you kind of elaborate on that for us?
Yeah, so basically there's two law firms. There's Digital Age Lawyers, where we work with business owners about their business and compliance. But we also replicate that in Aquarius Lawyers, where it's about maritime, marine and aquaculture. So, yes, I'm known as a fish lawyer, and I'm probably the only fish lawyer It doesn't mean I necessarily represent the fish. I actually quite like eating the fish. That's why I got into it.
Responsibly, no doubt.
Well, responsibly and informed, but wine law was already taken when I wanted to look for a niche. So I thought, what else do I like? Well, I love seafood, and they didn't have a lawyer. So I thought, what better way to wander around the world eating great seafood and being in an industry where when we look at population and production of food, seafood and particularly aquaculture is going to be the protein base going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's the only way we're going to be able to feed the world. So that's what Aquarius Lawyers does. We also do things around offshore developments, so such as wind, offshore aquaculture. So it's a really unique and novel space, and it's really interesting to be in that industry as it grows.
So I guess that answers my question about what inspired you to go down that path. But how does
Food.
How does it complement digital age lawyers?
Well, look, the way it complements it is because it is such a new and novel area, aquaculture, there's a whole what we call aquatech revolution. So there are some fantastic startup entrepreneurs all using AI technology. So, for instance, in Singapore, we have a client that's using AI to grow rainbow trout in tanks in not a cold climate at all, and it is fully automated. AI steps in, to make sure the right feed, cleaning, all of that. So the both do complement each other because it's about protecting business and personal assets.
Long history in the industry. What piece of advice could you give to somebody who is actually starting out their career in law? Because obviously, again, that landscape is changing with AI and whatnot. So.
Well, look, it's changed rapidly and will probably change even more so. The advice would be is, you need the legal knowledge, but you need to know how to apply it as well. And you need to get experience in other areas. So I had a PR and media background and then a law degree. So I think if you're just doing straight law, forget it. You're not going to have the required skills. The second thing is not to get hung up on Legally Blonde and Suits because it ain't what it is at all. And although it is changing, basics are still really important in terms of, understanding how law fits in with a solution. So the advice would be don't get hung up on what firm, what area of law, because you're going to have to be flexible going forward.
Yep, great advice. Let's finish up with a little game.
As long as it doesn't involve small white balls, we're good.
As we just
I'm
said,
terrible at golf.
Careful about what you say. No, it does not. So if you could describe your profession using only emojis, because I know this is a thing for you, which ones would you choose and why?
Okay, the first would be the confused face, because generally most people are pretty confused about law and how beneficial legal advice can be in your business. So it would be the confused face.
I was thinking brain blown.
Well, no, I was actually going to do the Spanish dancer next because it involves a lot of tap dancing.
Yeah.
Realistically, solutions aren't going to be as straightforward. And it's not the running marathon where you're here and you're going to get to there. You're going to have to tap dance. There's going to be some change of directions. There's probably going to be a few slips and falls to get to the outcome you want from a legal point of view. And the other would probably be the angry face, because most people come to us after they've made the mistake. So, for instance, I've got a client at the moment who drafted their own contract to buy a business and now is wondering why it's not working. Well, so the angry face.
Right.
Not what you were expecting.
Not exactly, but that's why I have conversations with the colourful Katherine Hawes. So thank you so much for your time today, and we really appreciate you. And if anybody has any legal questions, you know where to go.
Yep, absolutely. And try to put it not in emojis because they are open to interpretation.
Thank you so much.